Would you believe me if I told you that the mastermind behind the Backrooms actually came from a guy who can't even legally order a drink yet? Yeah, Kane Parsons was just a 16-year-old high schooler when he released an entire found footage style web series on YouTube that pretty much broke the internet overnight. In fact, it was such a hit that A24 hired him as the youngest director to turn his vision into a feature. Who would have thought that a creepypasta on the internet would have inspired a kid to give us one of the hottest horror films of the season? With the movie now out in theaters, now is probably the best time to discuss the entire lore of the Backrooms.
Sound, camera,
rolling.
All right, and action.
The bizarre origin story of the Backrooms web series. So, the new head-turning horror film starring Chiwetel Ejiofor as Clark follows an isolated, bitter man living in the furniture store he owns after a messy divorce. One night, he makes a baffling discovery in the basement about a doorway that leads to an infinite maze of mostly empty rooms with inexplicable content. There's a stop sign in the middle of a room, a hole filled with chairs, and it seems as if the environment was randomly generated. Soon, Clark becomes absolutely obsessed with exploring this other dimension, known as the Backrooms. And when he doesn't come out of it, his therapist, Mary, heads inside to search for him. Like I mentioned before, the Backrooms movie is based on Parsons' YouTube series of the same name, which has collectively drawn about 200 million views. But did you know the core idea actually didn't originate with him? It came from, of all places, the unmoderated anonymous image board site 4chan, where people are free to upload just about anything with the intention of engaging others and having ideas spread. So it was around 2019 when a 4chan user posted a photo on the site's paranormal board. This image was of an empty room with monotone yellow wallpaper, divided yellow walls, and matching yellow carpeting as an example of a disquieting image that just feels off. Then, in a separate comment, someone else imagined that the photo depicted a realm that the user dubbed as the Backrooms. According to them, if you're not careful and you no-clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of old moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, and approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. The comment also mentioned that nobody can save you if you end up hearing something nearby, because that would mean that it heard you too. The original post also discusses no-clipping, which is a video game term for when a player is able to pass through walls either via a glitch or a cheat code, oftentimes finding empty spaces left behind by the video game developers. The distinct visual aesthetic was expanded over time as more people began to provide their own additions to the Backrooms concept, thus adding various levels and even entities that inhabit the space. Anyway, from here on, the comment took off and became a popular creepypasta, or a spooky story spread online. Now, creepypastas like the Backrooms are short horror stories that eventually take on minds of their own as other users build onto the lore surrounding an initial story. While many popular creepypastas revolve around characters like Slender Man, Jeff the Killer, or the Rake, the Backrooms represent an entire alternate reality that users can no-clip into and may never return from. Well, when a young and impressionable Kane Parsons saw the original 4chan thread, he was intrigued by how it gave everyone the same strange feeling of how this concept made everyone feel something nobody could put into words. That definitely meant there was an endless string to pull on. Now, the Backrooms, as they are, most widely recognized, contained seemingly random echoes of our own reality, including pieces of office furniture, dividing walls, doors, and even full houses, streets, and tunnels. But that baseline aesthetic was largely defined by Parsons' ultra-popular YouTube series, in which he developed a 24-episode-long series of videos exploring the space, which was all built in Blender by Parsons himself. His YouTube channel, Kane Pixels, also explores the work of Async Research Institute, which is a mysterious organization located in San Jose, California, that found a way to distort reality and open a door into the Backrooms, thus expanding on its own interpretation of a random concept he came across on 4chan. So, January 7th, 2022 was the first time when Parsons uploaded a 9-minute found footage style short to YouTube, in which a person wanders through the Backrooms and encounters a mysterious creature. The bone-chilling video looks as if it's been shot in an actual environment, but Parsons actually created it with his hand-me-down laptop using free graphics software. By that point, Parsons had been making shorts as a hobby for years, and began taking it more seriously in middle school after illegally downloading visual effects software and teaching himself how to use it. He spent all his free time after school making the shorts, and while he gained success in some earlier YouTube videos, Parsons' first Backrooms short was a hit on a whole other level, as it amassed a staggering 78 million views, which in turn led him to create more than 23 additional videos, building out an elaborate mythology. The 24 episodes of this web series combine found footage of average people who basically no-clip out of reality and find themselves trapped in the unsettling maze, with research footage from Async Research Institute, an organization apparently dedicated to the study and exploration of this sort of space. Now, the concept of liminal spaces and canopsia are the main drivers behind the terror of the Backrooms. Liminal spaces are places meant for transition, so hallways, empty parking garages, office corridors, abandoned malls, and similar environments. All these locations already carry a strange feeling because they're familiar, yet they're not places where people usually spend much time. When they're completely empty, that familiarity clashes with the expectation of activity, creating a sense of uncertainty and disorientation. Then you closely tie this to canopsia, which is the eerie feeling that comes from seeing a place that should be full of life but isn't. We're used to crowded offices, busy streets, and bustling shopping centers. But when those same places are deserted, with empty chairs, vacant tables, and no signs of human presence, something feels deeply wrong. The Backrooms are basically filled with these unsettling sights, amplifying that discomfort at every turn. What makes the Backrooms especially terrifying is how suddenly and unexpectedly someone can end up there. One minute you're in a normal, familiar world, and the next you're completely isolated in an endless maze of empty spaces that almost feels right but isn't. Every room, hallway, and corner carries a subtle sense that something is off. And while the idea of being completely alone in such a place is frightening, there's one thought that's even worse, which is the possibility that you're not alone after all. As the lore of the Backrooms grew, users began to fill the space with tales of creatures that haunt the halls and hide behind the corners of this massive space. Literally hundreds of creatures have been named and cataloged, ranging from playful, impish creatures to full cosmic horrors, conjuring thoughts of the work of H.P. Lovecraft. While some of the entities stick to certain levels of the Backrooms, others seem to move more freely. Now, Parsons' iteration of the Backrooms includes creatures that are recognized as life forms, and are seen stalking and chasing those unfortunate enough to find themselves trapped in the Backrooms. The life forms have limbs, but are far from human. Rather, they're bacteria-based biological masses, capable of running, screaming, and even killing if they come into contact with a victim. As their victims are almost always fleeing, there are precious few clear shots of the life forms, so their true composition is largely a mystery. Backrooms YouTube series. So this famous YouTube series has 18 main episodes and a total of 24 episodes, with Static Dead End being the latest addition to the Backrooms. But the series starts off with a young filmmaker named Kane falling into the Backrooms, where he records his findings and even encounters with an unknown life form. Set primarily in the 1990s, all further episodes of the series mostly revolve around the Async Research Institute, a fictional research institute that discovers the Backrooms and attempts to study and document it. Their tests of the low proximity magnetic distortion system were intended to create a gateway to a seemingly infinite plane of existence, and they suddenly made first contact with the Backrooms on their 6th test of the machine. Over the upcoming months, expedition teams were sent out into the complex. At first, things seemed to go as planned, but major complications started to arise as Async progressed through the project. As it turns out, following this discovery, missing person cases began to skyrocket as people are pulled into the complex in places outside of Async's facility. Most of these episodes are centered around the various anomalies Async comes across in the complex, while the installments titled Found Footage are from the perspective of citizens finding their way into the complex on their own. Now, in case you haven't seen the Backrooms yet, let me tell you that this species of analog horror uses grainy footage which emulates old recording equipment. The premise of the videos is rather simple, as a character suddenly finds themselves mysteriously transported to another space, which doesn't seem to be used for anything or lead anywhere. The quest to explore it or escape from it is the ultimate story of the Backrooms. All episodes of the Backrooms mainly center on the fictional company Async, which opened a portal to the Backrooms and is studying it for commercial ends. Kane Parsons' story is a kind of science fiction, told through a series of internal memos, security tapes, experimental records, as well as the found footage of the first episode. While fans of the original Backrooms idea initially rebelled at Parsons' version as he deviated from the main idea of the 4chan creepypasta, his take on the concept has since become the dominant representation. In fact, Parsons' Backrooms has itself spawned a whole community around fan theories, parodies, and some very good imitations. Even though it's now mostly known through the work of one artist, Backrooms is still, in short, a very online phenomenon. I think Parsons is brilliant at creating rooms, hallways, and furniture that look extremely real and yet not quite right. Indeed, every new space of the Backrooms we see, starting from the apartment blocks, suburban neighborhoods, forests, and cityscapes, is a kind of parody of something intimately familiar. What he does is to strip these places of their familiarity, and he does that by changing subtle details, rendering them wholly dysfunctional with doors that lead nowhere, chairs too big to sit on, and signs flipped backwards. In another context, this could be funny, but in this web series, it becomes extremely unsettling. These spaces are so flagrantly hostile, so completely inhospitable, that it's a challenge even to survive in them. The more you progress through these episodes, you unknowingly gain a heightened awareness of the unnaturalness of daily life as the horror of bleak, endless hallways creeps in on you. The Backrooms games explored. Escape the Backrooms. So Escape the Backrooms is a cooperative horror game that was developed by Fancy Games and Blackbird Interactive, and later published by Secret Mode. The game was officially released on October 23, 2025 for Windows, after an early release version of it released on August 11, 2022 on Steam. The game was later released on PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series on the 28th of May, 2026. Now, the premise of Escape the Backrooms is based on the same internet creepypasta about no-clipping out of reality into a desolate, maze-like dimension of liminal spaces. In this game, players navigate over 30 strange levels while maintaining their sanity, solving puzzles, and avoiding hostile enemies in order to return to the real world. You pretty much start the game after accidentally clipping or falling through the boundaries of normal reality and end up in the seemingly infinite yellow wallpapered labyrinth. Players begin in the yellow-colored level 0 and explore to find exits of it in each subsequent level. They can easily sprint and fight items such as flashlights and food on most levels, which can be used to manage sanity or attract stat that results in the death of the player if it drops to 0. Now, players encounter different entities throughout the game, most of which are a threat. The most common enemies are smilers, which are found in the dark. There are also skin stealers, which look like the player, and hounds, which are dog-like creatures with human faces. But the majority of these entities can be easily avoided or fought off. You can either play alone or team up with 3 other players, but the goal is to traverse multiple levels to find an exit, and all players must make it to the exit alive to truly escape. Lastly, unlike typical horror games, you must manage your sanity here because your brain deteriorates when looking at monsters or unsettling environments. If it hits 0, you die, and the only way for you to restore your sanity is by consuming almond water. Inside the Backrooms. This one is a multiplayer puzzle adventure or horror game developed by Mr. Fat Cat, which was released on Steam for Microsoft Windows on June 20th, 2022. Here, players are trapped in a surreal alternate dimension that we know as the Backrooms, with the main objective being solving puzzles and avoiding dangerous entities in order to escape. The game includes several different mechanics in different puzzles that make for an intense experience and is usually recommended to play with friends. Inside the Backrooms also features a first-person perspective, and players must navigate through the maze-like environment of the game's liminal space to find a way out. These Backrooms consist of several levels, each with their own unique design and challenges. Naturally, players must search for clues and solve puzzles while avoiding hostile entities such as the hounds, smilers, and skin stealers. Not just that, Inside the Backrooms also includes multiplayer functionality, allowing players to work together to escape. Players can even communicate through voice chat and share resources such as almond water and moth jelly. Of course, the game's also based on the famous creepypasta with many real references implemented, such as iconic entities and important elements. You'll basically have to explore each room, look for elements that help you to continue advancing throughout the game and unlock new areas. But the further you go, the more dangerous it becomes. In fact, you have to pay close attention to an area, identify each entity, and know how to avoid them if you really want to survive. Players can look for supplies and store them inside their inventory while exploring all the rooms, solving puzzles, unlocking areas of the map, interacting, and trying to collect everything they find. The main objective of Inside the Backrooms is to basically engage players with its gameplay, difficulty, and atmosphere. There are countless identical rooms with an old dirty carpet and pale yellowish walls, where at first glance it gives you a gloomy and bad feeling, which you realize it's not a safe place. The game currently has 5 levels, and each level is huge and is designed to be more difficult than the previous one. There are also 2 secret mini-levels. The first will lead you to a secret ending, and another would lead you to an upcoming level. Lastly, in this game, you'll find several entities all based on the original creepypasta. Each entity will have different ways of attacking and manifesting, so it'll be important to understand the behavior of each of these entities and avoid them at all costs. But if several entities swarm toward you at the same time, you'll definitely have a pretty bad time. If you really want to survive in the Backrooms, you'll need to look for essential items and manage them properly, because if you go short on any of them, it could lead to your death. So you better collect all the pills, almond water, radios, flashlights, and protection suits on your journey through the Backrooms, as they could really help you to make it out of the yellow-colored hellhole alive. The Complex. Found footage. First released on Steam for Microsoft Windows on August 18th, 2022, this underrated psychological horror game was developed by Isarl and is one of the most notable Backrooms-inspired games as it's directly based on Kane Parsons' lore. It's the closest the game has gotten to recreating his analog horror feel. The complex found footage draws inspiration from atmospheric horror titles such as Layers of Fear and Abandoned Souls, as the game places its players inside a surreal and deeply unsettling environment that feels both familiar and completely alien. What makes the complex stand out is its unique take on horror. Instead of relying solely on traditional scares, it taps into the eerie concept of the Backrooms, with an endless maze of empty rooms, hallways, and forgotten spaces that seem to stretch on forever. The result is a psychological horror experience driven by isolation, uncertainty, and the constant feeling that something isn't quite right. The series expands on these ideas with its sequel, The Complex Expedition, which takes players even deeper into the mysterious world of the Backrooms. As this growing horror franchise continues to evolve, it's exciting to see how it explores the strange and nightmarish possibilities hidden within these liminal spaces, as players traverse and explore this huge, unforgiving world while dealing with an unrecognizable entity. Backrooms 1998. So, The Backrooms 1998 is a first-person found-footage psychological horror survival game, which follows the story of a young teen after he accidentally falls into the depths of the Backrooms in 1998. As the player, the basic plot of The Backrooms 1998 is that you're doing a bit of skateboarding before you fall off your skateboard, and then you find yourself in a bizarre and grotesque building that you have to make your way out of. You can roam freely, mark, explore, and try to unravel the story, but you can't scream as you're not alone. Right from the jump, The Backrooms 1998 nails a scary and unnerving environment. Even in the opening room, things don't quite feel or look right, even before you start to explore the building. This game is bound to make you feel on edge. Plus, the fact that you have to play this through a VHS camera only adds to the grimy nature of this game. As you explore this fictional space, it becomes quite clear that there's something very wrong with the place that you're in. There are bizarre messages and images scrawled on the walls, but it's the shadows you should fear, as they can hide some pretty disturbing surprises. On top of that, there's a twisted and bloodthirsty monster roaming the halls that wants nothing more than to eat you alive with its blood-stained teeth. Honestly, The Backrooms 1998 does a great job of setting a mood and atmosphere that will have you on tenterhooks from the start to end. You're never quite sure what's around the next corner. Starting from the VHS camera glitches to the screen fuzz, it all helps build and maintain a truly horror-like aesthetic that keeps you hooked into the game. Pools. Released in 2024 by Finnish developer Tensori, Pools is a horror walking simulator available on Windows, macOS, Linux, and iOS. Inspired by the same online liminal space phenomenon that has exploded in popularity in recent years, the game drops players into a massive maze-like complex of swimming pools, corridors, and strange architectural spaces that feel both familiar and unsettling. The experience is divided into 7 chapters, each lasting roughly 10 to 30 minutes. Initially presented as a piece of VHS tape found footage, the game embraces an analog horror aesthetic. If players die, for example, by falling into a deep pit, the VHS recording simply rewinds to moments before the accident, thus reinforcing that the illusion you're watching is recovered footage unfolded. Unlike many horror games, Pools has no traditional story, monsters, or enemies. In fact, the developers openly state that there are no creatures hunting the player. Instead, the game's horror comes entirely from its atmosphere. The endless hallways, silent rooms, echoing pools, and uncanny architecture create a constant feeling of unease, proving that a place can be terrifying even when nothing is chasing you. The gameplay of Pools is intentionally minimal, as players spend most of their time exploring on foot, swimming through flooded areas, or traveling down water slides. There are no puzzles to solve, although the sprawling environments can sometimes feel like a labyrinth. But in order to help prevent players from getting lost completely, subtle visual clues are scattered throughout the world. For instance, after leaving a pool, wet footprints and puddles can serve as breadcrumbs, helping players recognize when they're accidentally retracing their steps. Each chapter ultimately leads to a designated exit, thus encouraging players to continue deeper into the mysterious and dreamlike world that Pools creates. Dreamcore. So Dreamcore is a first-person psychological horror game developed by the Argentinian studio Montraluz and published by Talon Industries in 2025. Drawing heavily from the internet's fascination with liminal spaces and dreamlike environments, the game invites players to explore vast, non-linear worlds filled with hidden secrets and unsettling mysteries. Rather than focusing on combat or traditional horror threats, Dreamcore centers on exploration and puzzle solving as players navigate a series of surreal locations, each designed to evoke a sense of nostalgia and isolation and unease. These include Dream Pools, a sprawling indoor pool complex, Eternal Suburbia, an endless suburban neighborhood frozen in time, Playrooms, a maze of children's play areas, and Liminal Hotel, a strangely empty hotel filled with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Apparently, a fifth area called Dead Mall is currently in development and promises to expand the game's unsettling world even further. Many of the game's puzzles revolve around observation and navigation rather than straightforward problem solving. In fact, players have to pay close attention to the subtle visual details and environmental sounds, while often relying on trial and error to find hidden pathways and progress through the levels. Plus, the VHS-inspired visual filter that gives the game the appearance of a forgotten recording from another era only adds to the sense of unsettling uncertainty. Built using Unreal Engine 5, Dreamcore combines modern graphics with retro aesthetics to create a haunting experience that feels like stepping into a half-remembered dream or a nightmare you can't quite wake up from. Kane Parsons' Backrooms web series also inspired an entire American Horror Stories episode. So, back in October of 2025, as part of its annual Huluween event, Hulu had released 5 new episodes of the American Horror Stories spin-off series, American Horror Stories. And the first new installment starred Michael Imperioli as an Academy Award-winning screenwriter named Daniel, who is dealing with the trauma of losing his son, Roman. We soon find out that Daniel keeps opening doors leading to unnervingly empty rooms, like an abandoned grocery store, and gets lost in there for hours. One day, he eventually tracks down a man named Eli online who's managed to take video footage of these spaces, identical to what Daniel has encountered. Given that Eli gets imprisoned, Daniel visits him in jail, and that's when Eli tells him how he first stumbled upon the Backrooms. As it turns out, he got into a car accident that resulted in the death of a cyclist. It was Eli's fault, as he had been on his phone when he hit the woman, but he lied to the police, claiming that his victim ran the stop sign. While he walks free from the cops, that lie follows him everywhere, causing him to disassociate from the guilt and making it easy for him to transcend reality into the Backrooms. It's only when Eli tells the truth that he's finally able to be free, though it results in him going to jail. Over time, the episode slowly reveals that Daniel was also guilty of a crime, as he murdered his son and then buried his body. When the police find a security camera exposing Daniel's crime, they bring a SWAT team to his house and arrest him. But Daniel refuses to confess and instead pulls a gun on the cops. The confrontation ends in a shootout, with Daniel presumably dying and getting permanently transported to the back rooms, which turns out to be his personal hell. Earlier in the episode, we see Daniel ramble about how hell is a human concept that we've manifested and created. So in a sense, he's quite literally become responsible for his own eternal damnation. What's even more fitting is that the episode ends with Daniel stuck in a waiting room, which is yet another perfect example of a liminal space. There, Daniel is instructed to take a number, and when he looks at it, it's an 18-digit number, meaning it's well into the quintillions. To provide more context, you should know that the ticker on the wall says they're only serving person number 1, which implies that Daniel is never leaving that room, and he'll be stuck in that back room for eternity. Now it makes sense why Eli chose to go to jail instead of reveling in that kind of existential torment. The latest Kane Parsons movie has been an absolute banger. Coming to the movie us horror fans have waited for a long period of time, A24's Backrooms opens in the year 1990 when scientists from the Async Research Institute watched recovered footage from researcher Naren Warren, who went on an expedition to a larger extra-dimensional space called the Backrooms and was separated from his group before being attacked by an unknown entity. The story then turns to Clark, an aspiring architect turned furniture shop owner who's trying his best to manage his drinking problem and process his recent separation through sessions with his therapist, Mary. Due to his recent divorce, he's been sleeping on the floor of his shop, and that's when Clark quickly notices that the store's lights flicker on and off after dark. One night, when he's investigating down on the basement level, he spots a thin slither of light that appears to shine through the wall, which actually turns out to be a doorway into another dimension. This otherworldly place is the titular Backrooms, which are made up of misshapen and cavernous rooms that appear to stretch on and on. It's surely a disturbing concept, but Clark does the only thing a good horror protagonist can, as he starts aggressively exploring the place despite having multiple good reasons why he should leave this doorway alone. By the end of the film, Clark tells his therapist about the discovery, before drafting 2 of his employees, Kat and Bobby, to go on a mission with him. He wanted them to film a journey into the Backrooms as a kind of proof for Mary, who, as he had correctly suspected, did not believe him. But that mission soon went horribly wrong, with Bobby being dragged through a doorway by something unseen, and Kat and Clark getting separated in that monotonous hell. While running through a maze of rooms, Clark encounters a lurching woman with a misshapen face and puts down his camera when he hears Kat calling to him through the wall. The camera is then picked up by something unseen, and Clark's fate is left undetermined, until we switch to Mary's perspective, as she comes in looking for Clark as he fails to show up for their sessions, and in turn follows his trail of breadcrumbs that lead her to find the doorway herself. Near the film's climax, Mary is captured by Clark and wakes up tied to a chair. She finds herself seated at a table along with Clark and 3 strange, distorted creatures that resemble twisted versions of human beings. During their unsettling conversation, Clark explains his understanding of the Backrooms, describing it as everything that ever was. He suggests that the misshapen man sitting beside him is not a real person, but rather a copy or perhaps a lingering memory of someone who exists in the real world. Before he can explain further, the discussion is violently interrupted when a towering, grotesque creature bursts into the room. To Mary's horror, it appears to be a monstrous version of Clark himself, dressed in the pirate costume he used as the mascot for his furniture store. Before you know it, the creature immediately kills Clark before turning its attention to Mary. In response, a terrified Mary flees through the labyrinthine corridors of the Backrooms, desperately searching for a way out. During her escape, she encounters a group of individuals wearing biohazard suits, hinting that others may have been studying or investigating this bizarre dimension all along. In the film's final scene, we see Mary sitting across from a scientist, who reveals that an entire team has dedicated itself to understanding the mysteries of the Backrooms. His comments suggest that humanity has only scratched the surface of what this strange realm truly is. But the story ends on an unsettling note, because just before the credits roll, the film returns to the Backrooms, where a distorted, misshapen version of Mary sits alone in an empty room. While the Backrooms appear to be shaped, or at least influenced, by the memories, emotions, and experiences of the people who enter them, they're far more than a simple product of the mind. The existence of scientists actively studying, exploring, and mapping the Backrooms suggests that it's a tangible place with its own physical reality, rather than a shared hallucination or psychological construct. The film also makes it clear that the Backrooms are not meant to be interpreted as a traditional version of hell, purgatory, or any other afterlife. Although the endless corridors and unsettling atmosphere can feel like a form of spiritual punishment, there's no indication that the people trapped there are dead or being judged. Instead, the Backrooms seems to exist as a mysterious parallel realm, one that operates according to the rules humanity has only begun to understand. The mystery of the Backrooms might never be solved. Even after 24 episodes of the web series and a feature-length film, we still have very few concrete answers on what the Backrooms actually are or where they came from. The closest thing to an explanation comes from Clark, who shares his theories about a strange dimension late in the story. However, by that point, the isolation and exposure to the horrors lurking within the Backrooms have left him psychologically shattered, making him far from a reliable source of information. According to Clark's interpretation, the Backrooms may be a vast network of distorted copies of every place that's ever existed. These locations are repeatedly remembered and recreated incorrectly, resulting in uncanny, dreamlike versions of familiar spaces. While this idea offers the most substantial insight into the nature of the Backrooms so far, it remains only a theory rather than a confirmed explanation. In many ways, that mystery is the whole point, because if you think about it, the Backrooms function as a cosmic Lovecraftian nightmare, as it's an endless realm that defies human understanding. Its sprawling corridors, impossible architecture, and terrifying imitations of human beings are frightening precisely because they can't be fully explained. The concept of unknown is woven into the very fabric of the setting, and because of that, it's unlikely that audiences will ever receive definitive answers about the Backrooms' origins or the rules governing its existence. Even if the franchise continues to expand with multiple sequels, which seems entirely possible given its popularity, the mystery will likely remain intact. Even I agree that the Backrooms are most effective when they remain an incomprehensible infinite labyrinth lurking just beyond reality and forever resisting humanity's attempts to understand it. Even Kane Parsons understands the value of keeping their mysteries intact. The endless, unsettling spaces are frightening enough on their own, but the presence of the bizarre, barely human creatures that inhabit them only add to the dread. In that sense, the less we understand about these entities in the Backrooms themselves, the more terrifying they become. If the franchise were to fully explain how the Backrooms were created, why they continue to expand, or where the distorted copies of people come from, much of that fear would inevitably disappear. Because once something's understood, it becomes easier to imagine ways to control it, fight it, or escape it. Mystery fuels horror, and the Backrooms thrive on uncertainty. Moreover, for the people trapped inside this labyrinth, the most frightening realization is that there may never be any answers. That sense of helplessness is a major part of what makes the setting so uniquely morbid. Parsons captures this feeling remarkably well in both his YouTube series and the feature film adaptation, as characters wander through their endless corridors, lose themselves in impossible spaces, or flee from terrifying creatures. We also share their confusion and fear, because we know so little about what's happening that every new discovery raises more questions than answers, making the experience even more immersive and unnerving. Okay guys, that brings me to the very end of this video. Do you also agree that the mystery of the Backrooms only amplifies the horror instead of weakening it? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comments below.